Let's read Matthew chapter 26. We're going to be in verse 47, and we're just going to read all the way through 68, and we'll chat about it along the way. Verse 47, while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with a great crowd, with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man, seize him." And he came up to Jesus at once and said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you came to do." Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were there, stretched out his hand and with his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Jeez, Peter. Oh, it didn't say that. I spoiled it. We'll get there. Okay. Verse 52. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels?" We'll talk about that. It's very interesting. "But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled that it must be so?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples left him and fled. Verse 57. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. And Peter was following him, but at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus, that they might put him to death. But they found none. Though many false witnesses came forward, at least 2 came forward and said, "This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?" But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, "I adjure you by the living God." That's funny, because the living God is sitting literally right in front of him. Okay. "Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so, but I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Verse 65. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, wow, he's really dramatic. "He has utter blasphemy. What further witness do we need? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spit in his face and struck him. And some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is that who struck you?" Okay. If you're taking notes, I'm titling this sermon, "The Night Heaven Held Back." The night heaven held back. Now, as we've read through these scriptures in Matthew, a lot of us have been to church before, and we have heard of these scriptures. We know about the story of Jesus being betrayed by Judas. We now have jokes these days, and we call people that betray us Judas. We call them these things because it represents what Judas did to Jesus. But there's something here for all of us to see, and it's important for us to lean into. I think so oftentimes when we read the Bible with the perspective of, oh, I've done this before. We get repetitive with reading the scriptures. We don't allow those scriptures to speak a new thing over us. We don't allow ourselves to learn a little bit more. But what's interesting is the moment you dive into scriptures, you see little details that stand out, and they stand out for a reason. Now get this, in verse 47, it literally says, while he was still speaking, Jesus is saying right now, verse 46, rise up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand, and Judas is walking forward. At that very moment, it's almost like Jesus knew that his betrayer was coming. And this is the most mind-boggling thing ever. Because let's think about it. If it was from our perspective and we knew someone was going to betray us and try to kill us, would we walk right into their hands? No. A normal human would see his betrayer, the one who is going to take him to his death. We would have said, I'm out of here. I prayed about it, and I'm out of here. You know what I mean? I'm gone. I'm leaving. I'm running. But what's crazy is after the prayer of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, he straightens up his shoulders and says, my accuser is at hand, let's go. And he decides to walk right towards harm. Now, this is something that doesn't make sense oftentimes to the normal human side in us. But we need to understand something, that this was the plan from the very beginning. That Jesus' agenda was to walk into harm's way so that you would not have to be harmed by sin. That you would be given a new life, a new way. So Jesus' agenda is to walk straight into the harm. Now this is the craziest thing that we'll see. In verse 47 it says that he's with his 12, Judas comes, and it says that a great crowd with swords and clubs. Swords and clubs. Now, Matthew leaves out a couple of details that we find actually in John 18. John 18 says this. It says that a Roman cohort came to seize Jesus. So when we hear a cohort, we're like, oh, that must be some men, huh? Probably like 20, maybe 30. That seems like a lot of people. Okay, a Roman cohort, obviously it's changed over the years of the Roman time, the empire. There were different various numbers. You saw it from being anywhere from 480 men to about 600 men. A Roman cohort. Now, when it's communicating a Roman cohort as well, this cohort would be soldiers trained in war. Now, there's something interesting that we see here as well. It's not just soldiers. The soldiers would have swords. They were the only ones in this time that actually have a weapon. But what we see is that chief priests and the priests, the elders of the people, were also there. What we would see is that there was also a police force that helped the Jewish people. The temple, the tabernacles, they had their own little battalion as well. They were not allowed to carry swords. They were allowed to carry clubs to beat people, but not kill people. That was only held by the Roman Empire. Okay, now I want you to think about this for 1 second, okay? Upwards of 600 people coming to take over one dude that has been preaching about peace. Seems a little overkill, does it not? It seems ridiculous. Has Jesus come in with swords, with weapons, to harm people? When he has multitudes around him, is his agenda to be like some dictator that tells them, you need to follow my way and we must rule the day and take over this empire? Not once. Not once. Literally, even the soldiers are in the crowd listening. They're like, yeah, I mean, he's talking about loving your neighbor. He literally just told them to carry our gear for an extra mile. I'm for that. If Jesus is preaching it, the Roman Empire is like, hallelujah. They get to carry my gear for 2 miles instead of 1. Because legally, the Roman Empire was only allowed to take anyone and say, you're carrying my gear, and it was only for 1 mile. They couldn't charge anyone else to carry it further than 1 mile. But then Jesus is like, carry it too for them. So the Roman Empire was like, okay, cool, right on, that's wonderful. But they come in a great force, and now the reason they come in a great force is because it seems like the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin has made it seem like Jesus is a threat to all of the political agenda of the Roman Empire. That he has come to create hostility, he's come to create division, he's come to be very persuasive to the people, and it's a bad thing. Even Jesus at one point says that he's come to divide, not unify. Because those who follow Christ will be separated from the world, and the world will be separated from those who follow Christ. We're different. If you've given your life to Jesus, you're weird. I'm sorry. It's true. You live in a different society. Everybody has seen the world around them and they live by what they see. But we believe something we do not see completely. We believe in faith through heaven's eyes. That there has been a promise given to us in reality, but it's promising of something to come that hasn't happened yet. So we step by the hope of that promise. Now there's truth in that promise because we've seen time in and time out those prophecies, as we read here, have been fulfilled. Have been fulfilled. So there's still an anchor of truth, but there is this faith that is required. We're different. Now, they come to take Jesus, and get this. It says that Judas Iscariot told this squad, I will give you a sign. He could have chosen any sign. Any sign. What was the sign that he chose to betray Jesus? It was literally a kiss. And I want you to think about that. In this culture, it was a customary thing to kiss those that you were close to on the cheek. You kiss them. It shows that there's an intimacy between you. There's respect between you. There's companionship between you. That there is this closeness. And what he chooses a thing that was meant for friendship, peace, and love, and he turns it into a weapon of betrayal. He goes to Jesus and kisses him. Now the question is, why would he have to give a sign? Doesn't everybody know about Jesus? Now, at this time, the Roman Empire might not all know about who Jesus is. They've heard of Jesus, but they don't know what he looks like. There's upwards of 600 people in this battalion coming against Jesus. And he gives them a sign by kissing him on the cheek, saying, this is him. And it literally connects to Proverbs 27, verse 6, but the kisses of the enemy are deceitful. And if you notice, he says, Rabbi, not Lord again. From there in verse 50, Jesus says something. He turns to Judas and says, friend. Friend, do what you've come to do. Now, in our English language, when we read scriptures, we see friend, and we're like, oh, Jesus is so kind to him, right? He's calling him friend, even though he's betraying him. But just moments ago, during the supper, he said it's better for this dude to never be born and to die. Okay, what's going on here? Now, this word that's specifically used isn't a friend in Jesus that we think about, that Jesus was a friend to sinners. The word is actually more meaning companion or associate, okay? Companion or associate. And when we read it in Matthew's gospel, it's interesting. Every single time we see it, it's in the context of confrontation. Every single time we see it. We saw it in Matthew 20. If you remember, the landowner addresses the complaining workers. They were mad that they didn't get the same paycheck as the other guys that only worked an hour. And he says, friend, I gave you what was due, what was promised to you. If you remember, there was also the great feast They were invited, but there was a guy that comes in that was not dressed correctly. In Matthew 22, the king addresses him, and he calls him friend. Why are you not dressed appropriate for the wedding? And then right after that, it says, throw him into the outer darkness where there's gnashing of teeth. Like, okay, wow, that sounds aggressive. So this friend isn't a friend like sympathetic. This is in confrontation. He says, go and do what you came to do. And I want you to sit with that for a second. At this moment, Jesus, there were many moments leading up to this that he was able to get out of this very situation. He was able to get out of it. But what he did even here, he said, hey, I know why you're here. Let's do it. I know why you're here. Let's do it. Jesus chose to allow great harm to come to him. This was the plan all along. Now, John 18, it gives us another little tidbit, which is interesting. It says that they came and they ask, or Jesus steps forward and says, whom are you seeking? They say, Jesus of Nazareth. And in John's account, it says, I am he. Now, in translation, for our English understanding, we added the word he. We added the word he. What Jesus really said is, I am. Now, if you do a word study on that, and you look back in Exodus, and you look back when God introduced himself to Moses, guess what his name was? I am. What Jesus just said was that he is God. It literally says in John 18, right after that the people fell over backwards. Interesting. That God's power, God's authority was revealed in that very moment. And I think it's comical because they bring a force to come and shackle the true power. But Jesus displays that he's still in control. That he is not taken to be killed, but that he willingly is giving over his life. We'll see it again here. From there, Matthew it tells us that some guy just decided to take out a sword and strike the high priest's servant's ear. I love it. We find out that John doesn't sugarcoat it. If you have read the scriptures, you've found out that John and Peter have a bromance, okay? This is a real thing in scriptures. There is a bromance. What I mean by that, there is definitely competition happening. They had push-up competition all the time. They're like, how many push-ups you got? Let's do it. I'll do 50. I bet you can't do more than me. You know what I mean? It literally says that there's this time when Jesus is said to be resurrected, okay? The ladies come back, tell the boys, and it says that John and Peter literally had a foot race to the tomb. And then John makes sure to tell us, and I won. John makes sure to let us know that he beat Peter and that he was faster, okay? So what's funny is John's like, yeah, Peter did it. It was Peter. It was definitely Peter. Peter had a sword. If you remember, actually, Jesus gave them a sword earlier that he told them to protect themselves. But what's interesting is the timing was wrong. And what's interesting, let's think about the progression that's happened. Jesus was found praying, and he was willing to walk in the will of God because of it. Peter was found sleeping, and because of it, he chose to walk in his understanding of who the Messiah is. His belief of the Messiah was to rule and reign, to take over the Roman Empire. So if Jesus is getting imprisoned to be killed, that's a threat to the Messiah's reign. So what does Peter do? Let's be real. His heart, he loves Jesus. He wants to protect Jesus. He wants to fight for Jesus. So he's like, listen, 600 dudes, I got this. pulls out his sword. He was definitely a bro and thought that he could do this. He's like, I could take on 600 soldiers. This is easy. Cracks his neck, pulls his sword out. Let's go. He first attacks the dude that has no weapon whatsoever, the guy that's representing the chief priest, okay? It says that he hacks his ear off. Do you know what that means? He was aiming for the head. He was going one strike wonder right there. He was definitely trying to end it with one strike, go on to the next. He was showing his ninja moves for sure. He was going for the kill. His agenda was contrary to the will of God. That God was going to allow suffering for his son so that we can inherit eternal life. Do you understand, even in your life, there are moments of suffering? All of us. I think we live in this fantasy world where we believe that our life has to be perfect at all times. And if it's not perfect, is when we start to complain, when we start to worry, when we start to just get bent out of shape. But have you noticed that even in the times of great stress, tribulation, that God has used it maybe to strengthen you or maybe to give strength to another? Sometimes when we walk through these things, we need to understand, God, not my will, because my will says I want chocolate all the time. I want a beautiful home. I want a nice car. I want my life to be peaceful and wonderful. That's my will. But God's will sometimes is to allow trials for a reason. And this trial, Jesus is to walk through, okay? From there, we see that Jesus rebukes him and says, put your sword away. And then I love it in verse 53. He looks at Peter and he's like, Peter, let's think about this for 1 second. And I'm going to be real with you. I think we all should do the same thing. We should sometimes make ourselves feel very dumb at times, okay? This is a good thing. Jesus looks at Peter and says, hey, let's think about this, buddy. You have a sword. You're going to use it. You're going to die by that, okay? Just so you know. 600 guys, soldiers, trained. Let's think about that. Let's think about your decision, okay, for one moment. And then he says, do you not think? He's like, think about it. Do you not think that I have the ability to call upon my Father and that he could send 12 legions of angels? Now, think about where Peter's been, okay? Peter's been walking with Jesus, and he has seen Jesus do crazy things. He saw Jesus take a fish and then gave it. Took another fish and then gave it. Took another fish, and then you're like, wait, wasn't there only 5 fish? How is there 1,700 now? You know what I mean? Like, wasn't there only a few loaves? How is there enough to feed 5,000 plus? He was able to see a fig tree just like wither and die right before his eyes. He was able to see Jesus go up to a dude and just for fun spit in the dirt, take the dirt, put it in this guy's eyes that is blind and said, all right, you're going to see now. Have fun. And then all of a sudden he sees. Peter has seen some crazy things. He's seen the power of God displayed right before his eyes, okay? And then Jesus is like, do you think that same power has the ability to get out of this situation? Let's be real. How many times have we gotten out of random sketchy situations? If you read the Bible, you've seen multiple times where it says, and Jesus somehow got out of it. Why? Because his time was not yet. They all went to stone him, but Jesus was able to find a way out of it. That Jesus was able to maneuver because his time had not yet come. But here he's like, yeah, let's go. My time has come. He's showing Peter the power of heaven. In the same way, are you stressing about finances? Maybe you need to look in the mirror and say, do you think God is able? Are you struggling with anxiety and worry? Look in the mirror. Do you think God can give me strength? Does God have the power? Yeah, absolutely. And I love it. Jesus says 12 legions. Okay. If you thought a cohort was big, if you thought a cohort was big. Now, a legion represented multiple cohorts. It was upwards of 6,000 men. A legion was upwards of 6,000 men. Now, Jesus says that I can call down, how many? 12 legions. 12 legions. That would be right around 72,000 angels, okay? That's a lot of angels. Now, I want you also to think about this perspective. It tells us in 2 Kings 19, it tells us that one angel, just one, okay? One angel killed 185 Assyrians by himself. So, when we're taking a comparison of 600 Roman soldiers and 72,000 angels, let's be real. The odds are not in the favor of the Roman Empire. Not at all. Jesus is straight up flexing here. He's like, if I were to pray it, God would send the angels. I have that ability, Jesus says, but I choose not to. I choose not to walk in that power, but in humility, so that I can transfer that power into your guys' account. He allows all of that to happen, which is crazy. And sometimes we need to do this to ourselves. We need encouragement in our life. Honestly, it's interesting. I've read statistics. I believe in the 1950s, they asked people, hey, would you say you're happy? Would you say you're happy? I believe the statistics was right around like 92, 93% of people in the 1950s said, yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy. They did another statistic, early 2000s, I think it was like 2017. They went around and asked people, hey, are you happy? And it was under 50% in the 40 percentile. It went from 90% to 40%. And what we see is that there's an increasing number of people that continue to claim they are not happy. Now, this is an interesting thing to think about. And the reason being is if we are not happy, it often means that we are not satisfied with what God has provided and given to us. We think that there's a better hand for us, a better deck of cards that could have been dealt. If only I was like them. But what's interesting is also that person that we wish we were like is also wishing that they were the next stage up as well. And what happens is oftentimes people look in the mirror and complain and are not satisfied or not reminded about the goodness of God. But if we change our perspective, just like Jesus changes the perspective of Peter, yes, the odds don't look good right now with the naked eye. 600 people coming to take Jesus? It reminds me of Elijah too, when he had his servant with him. He was surrounded by an army. He prays for his servant and says, Lord, open up his eyes. You know what the servant was able to see? An army surrounding the army. An army of angels. Friends, do you desire to walk in a joyful life? Then it's a life always looking to the true power, authority, and goodness of God. When we look at what's around us, the circumstances, stop allowing it to be so devastating to you. Honestly, every single person, we have gone through different things. Your story, yes, is probably hard because we live in a fallen nature. But guess what? Look to the left, look to the right. Their story's hard too. Who are we to whine and complain when God has given us the greatest gift of all? Who are we to say that we aren't joyful, that we aren't happy? Because we should be the happiest people of all. Because we have hope, because Jesus wasn't gonna call 72,000 angels down from heaven. Because he chose to step in our place to give us an inheritance we do not deserve. Who cares what happens here on earth? Though it may hurt for a moment, though it may be a struggle for a moment, we have joy looking to eternity. Because Jesus tells us that heaven's pretty cool, okay? I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't been there yet, so I can't tell you all the details. I know the streets are gold. There's a river. There's a throne. I know there's a big house with lots of rooms, probably football. I'm just saying. It's going to be wonderful. But all I know is that heaven is described as the best. The best. We could think in our life, what is the best thing? It's better than that. It's better than that. Blows our mind out of the water. Gives us a new perspective of what best even means. We haven't even touched the surface of best. But best is to come. Jesus reframes Peter's mind and says, listen, dude, I still have power. But, in verse 54, I am not choosing to do that because scriptures must be fulfilled. Must be. Jesus is stepping forward, not in plan B, plan C, but in plan A. If you remember, last week we talked about the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus said, if this cup can pass from me, let it pass. What is the cup? Wrath, death, pain, hurt. It was not good, okay? In that moment, if there was another way, God would have said, all right, Jesus, there is another way. There's no other way. In God's will, he destined that this would be the way. And once again, throughout scriptures, what do we see? Only Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is the way. That there is no other. Now, a lot of us read that and we're like, all right, what scriptures does it fulfill? He says it fulfills scriptures. Which ones? Well, Psalms 41:9. Even my own familiar friend has lifted up a heel against me. Oh, maybe Zechariah 13:7. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Okay. Maybe Isaiah 53:7. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open up his mouth. Sounds familiar. It was written hundreds of years before. Okay. Maybe Isaiah 56. I did not hide my face from shame and spitting. I think they did that. Okay, cool. Maybe Psalms 35:11. Fierce witnesses rise up against me. False witnesses. Maybe Psalms 110:1. Sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. Or maybe Jesus quotes the Son of Man in Daniel 7. One like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. Just a couple of fulfilled scriptures. But there's a lot of fulfilled scriptures that Jesus fulfills. At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, have you come out against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? He's kind of showing them how ridiculous this is. And he tells them, I literally sat with you in the temple, like every day. I was there in the temple. I was not trying to cause division. I was not trying to be hurtful, except for that one time when he flipped the tables, that type of thing. But I came to teach you. I'm literally teaching you. I sat in the temple. Why didn't you take me when I was in the temple? The answer is because they were scared of the people. Now, this shows you, we're going to finish here and we're not going to do the next passage because I talk too much. But this shows you something. That they are taking Jesus unlawfully. Because the right way that they would have taken a prisoner was not in hiding. It would have not been in the nighttime. It would have not been in secret. It shows us what they're doing, they're trying to cover up. Because it is wrong. Even in the customs of the Jewish temple, how they are approaching this is not how the chief priests and the priests should respond. That there should be checks and balances. That there should be above reproach in their conduct. The reason that they were put in order, the chief priests, the priests and such, was so that there would be authority for justice. So that the right would be done, not the wrong. But it shows us even at the top of the religious system that they're manipulating and deceiving people to kill the one who is right. And I want you to see what Matthew's trying to show us. Even the cream of the crop, even the best of the best, even the most religious, often work in the dark places. often have a humanity, a sinful nature that is not of God. And what I love about this is showing us something important, that you do not ever follow a man. You don't ever follow a man. A pastor might have a good word to preach, and it might be from the Bible, take that. But that man that teaches you is not the man. That man is flawed, he's human. That he is struggling at times, that he isn't walking perfectly even though he tries. But I want you to understand something. Jesus alone is the one that you can bank on and trust. And I think I want to leave you with this. Friends, I think oftentimes we think being a Christian is by learning from a man. Being a Christian, we go to church and we listen to a man. But I want you to understand something. This is the smallest thing in your relationship with the Lord. Sunday morning should be the smallest thing, because you have direct access to King Jesus, because he was willing to shut up heaven so that earth could attack him, so that heaven would be opened to earth for you. And with that, friends, throughout each and every single day, allow Jesus to speak over your life. Please, friends. Don't let Sunday be the only day that Jesus speaks to you. A man speaks to you. Because I believe you have direct access to God.